The widow's betrayal. It was the 1800s. Across the vast, barren lands of the American frontier, wagon trains moved in search of a new world. The rhythmic pounding of hooves, the creaking of wooden wheels, and the cries of restless children filled the air. But hidden beneath the noise was a quiet sorrow. Sarah Whitlock, a beautiful but grief-stricken woman, had become a widow just months ago. Her husband, John Whitlock, was a brave but stubborn man who had always led from the front. But during a skirmish with bandits, he was killed. After his death, Sarah's life changed. The people in the wagon train, instead of showing sympathy, began to distance themselves. They believed she was cursed. The group was running low on food and water. The rains hadn't come, the ground was dry, and their animals were collapsing from exhaustion. Whispers began to spread. Ever since that widow joined us, nothing but misfortune has followed. Sarah, who quietly did her chores and never caused trouble, now found herself the target of blame and fear. She would sit alone at night, clutching a small portrait of her husband, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. She couldn't believe how quickly people had turned on her. One evening, the wagon leader, Elias Green, called a secret meeting. "We must survive," he said. "If her presence brings danger to our children, then we must make a choice." A few heads nodded. Others stayed silent. At dawn the next day, Sarah stepped out of her tent and was met with an eerie silence. The wagons were gone. The people had vanished. Near her tent was a small cloth bundle. Inside were a piece of dry bread, a bottle of water, and a few worn clothes. She looked around in disbelief. "They left me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Not even one person stayed behind." There was no answer, only the sound of wind brushing through the dry bushes and the distant call of vultures circling above. The sun was already rising, its heat beginning to scorch the earth. Sarah tried to walk. She picked a direction and took a few steps, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to the ground, her mouth parched, her skin burning. She pulled the shawl around her and sat beneath a dry tree, praying for strength. As night fell, the desert grew cold. The stars above twinkled like silent witnesses. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled. Sarah curled up beneath the tree, her body shaking, and looked up at the sky. "If my time has come," she whispered, "then take me in peace. But if there's anyone out there who can hear me, send help." Her voice was weak, her heart heavy with pain. The last image in her mind was of her husband's smile, and then everything faded. What she didn't know was that her prayer had been heard. Far away, hidden among the hills, someone had seen her. His eyes were sharp, his heart cautious, but not cold. He was not a settler. He was a Navajo warrior, the warrior's honor. The desert was quiet, save for the soft crunch of sand beneath moccasin-covered feet. Tatsiai, a tall and proud Navajo warrior, moved with the silence of the wind. His dark eyes scanned the horizon with purpose. He was deep into his vision quest, a sacred journey that many warriors took to seek clarity, strength, and guidance from the spirits of the land. But on this day, the spirits had led him somewhere unexpected. Perched on a ridge, he looked down into a small clearing where a figure lay motionless beneath a crooked tree. At first, he thought it might be a trap. White settlers had brought nothing but pain and broken promises to his people. His fingers tightened around the spear slung across his back. Then he saw her clearly. A woman, pale, weak, and broken. Her lips cracked from thirst, her dress torn and dusty. A bottle lay empty beside her, and vultures circled lazily above. Tatsiai hesitated. She was one of them, the settlers who had stolen land, burned villages, and slaughtered innocents. But as he looked at her, truly looked, he didn't see hatred. He saw suffering, abandonment, and something deeper, an innocence that didn't belong among cruel men. He descended the slopes slowly, his presence casting a long shadow over the woman. She stirred slightly, barely conscious. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see a silhouette, dark, powerful, otherworldly. Her lips moved. No sound came. "I will not let you die," Tatsiai murmured, more to the spirits than to her. He knelt beside her, carefully lifting her into his arms. She was light as a feather, her body fragile. For a moment, he looked to the sky, silently acknowledging the sacred burden he now carried. The journey back to his camp was long and slow. He walked for hours under the beating sun, stopping only to offer her sips of precious water from his own pouch. She mumbled in fevered dreams, names, pleas, prayers. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the pain. Finally, as the orange glow of dusk touched the sky, he arrived at a hidden camp nestled between red rocks and whispering pines. It was a sacred place, known only to his people. Tatsiai laid her gently on a bed of woven blankets inside a small hogan. He ground herbs, lit healing incense, and whispered prayers to his ancestors. He placed a cool cloth on her forehead and pressed a healing paste to her cracked lips. Days passed. Sarah drifted in and out of sleep, never fully awake, never fully gone. Tatsiai stayed close, watching her, tending to her like a guardian spirit. He brought her soup made from wild roots and herbs, fed her with careful hands, and spoke softly in Navajo, even though she could not understand. At last, one morning, her eyes opened, truly opened. She blinked at the ceiling, then slowly turned her head to find him sitting nearby, carving a small wooden totem. "Where?" she tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. Tatsiai looked up and met her eyes. "You are safe," he said gently. "You were left to die, but the spirits led me to you." Sarah's breath caught. Memories came flooding back, the abandonment, the hunger, the silence. And now this stranger, this warrior. She tried to sit up, but winced. He came to her side. "Rest. Your body is not ready, but you will live." Tears welled in her eyes. Why did you help me?" He paused, then said, "Because no one deserves to die alone." For a long time, they simply looked at each other, two worlds colliding, and yet something unspoken connecting them. Though their languages were different, their pain was not. Both had lost. Both had been betrayed by the world. Over the next few days, they began to communicate through simple words, gestures, and expressions. Tatsiai taught her how to grind herbs, how to listen to the land, how to respect the wind and fire. Sarah, in turn, shared her limited knowledge of farming, weaving, and simple songs from her childhood. Their bond began to grow. One afternoon, while gathering herbs near a river, Sarah asked him, "Do you hate all settlers?" Tatsiai looked at her for a long time before replying, "I hate what they have done, but not every soul is the same." She nodded slowly. "They left me like I was nothing." "You are not nothing," he said firmly. "You are alive. You are strong." Sarah looked away, her heart heavy. But for the first time in weeks, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a curse, but as a human being. As the sun set behind the red cliffs, casting golden light over the land, Sarah and Tatsiai sat by the fire. He began to hum a traditional chant, a deep, calming melody that echoed through the rocks. Sarah listened, eyes closed, feeling something inside her heal, something that had long been broken. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew this. The man who had every reason to hate her had chosen to save her. And somehow, that meant everything, fire and healing. Weeks passed, and the once broken widow was no longer the pale, fragile woman who had been left to die beneath a tree. Sarah's cheeks now carried color. Her steps were steady, her gaze more certain. Though the pain of betrayal still lingered in her heart, something deeper had begun to take root, something that only grows in the shelter of safety. Tatsiai had not spoken of his past, but Sarah could sense he had endured his own scars. The way he watched the horizon, the way he paused when he heard distant hoofbeats. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a man who had lost, endured, and yet still chose compassion. One evening, while the air turned crisp and the sky painted itself in gold and crimson, Tatsiai sat across from Sarah beside the fire. Flames crackled between them, dancing like spirits, casting shadows on the red rock walls of their camp. Tatsiai held a small, leather-wrapped pouch in his hands. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a carved piece of smooth obsidian shaped like a bear. He placed it between them on a flat stone. "In my people's stories," he said quietly, the bear is strength, not just in muscle, but in spirit. It teaches us to heal ourselves, to survive the winter, to defend those we care for. Sarah looked at the carving with quiet reverence. It's beautiful. He nodded. I made this during my vision quest before I found you. I didn't know why, but now I do. Her eyes lifted to his. You think I have strength like that? Tatsiai smiled faintly. You are alive, aren't you? Sarah chuckled softly, then turned serious. That day, I thought I would die. I thought maybe I deserved it. I had no one left. My husband was gone. The people I trusted, they feared me, blamed me. I started to believe I was a curse. You are not a curse, Tatsiai said firmly. You were just with the wrong people. His words struck something deep within her. That night, as the fire dwindled, Tatsiai told her stories of his people, of how the stars were placed in the sky, how the mountains came to be, and how a warrior must not only fight with his hands but also with his heart. Sarah listened, enchanted. In return, she shared memories of her childhood, days spent chasing fireflies, baking with her mother, and the quiet afternoon she used to spend reading under a tree. It was the first time she had spoken of home without pain. One afternoon, while gathering water from a nearby stream, Sarah slipped and scraped her arm against a jagged rock. Blood welled up instantly. She winced and tried to stop the bleeding with her shawl. Tatsiai arrived moments later, his instincts sharp. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, cleaned the wound gently with herbs, and wrapped it with soft, handmade cloth. You still rush, he said with a quiet grin. You must learn to listen to the earth. She smiled through the sting. I'm learning. Thanks to you. Tatsiai met her eyes, and something passed between them. Unspoken, but powerful. A warmth that had little to do with the fire or the sun. That evening, as they prepared a meal of roasted rabbit and wild vegetables, Tatsiai asked a question he had kept buried for days. Would you return to your people if you had the chance? Sarah paused, hands still. She looked into the fire. I used to think I would, that I needed them, that I belonged there. But now, I don't know. That world, it never truly accepted me. Not even when I followed all their rules. Tatsiai nodded. Here, the earth accepts who you are, not who others say you should be. She breathed in deeply, the scent of pine and smoke in the air. Then maybe this is where I was meant to be. Later that night, a sudden cry echoed through the valley, sharp and angry. Tatsiai rose immediately, spear in hand, motioning Sarah to stay low. He vanished into the darkness like a shadow. Moments felt like hours. Then he returned, his face tense. Settlers. 3 of them. Armed. They were tracking something. Maybe me, maybe you. Fear gripped Sarah's chest. What do we do? Tatsiai looked toward the moonlit cliffs. We leave at first light. I will not let them take you. But this place, your home. You are my home now, he said simply. The words stunned her. In all the loneliness, the silence, the rejection she had felt for so long, those 4 words settled into her soul like rain on dry soil. They packed quickly the next morning, heading deeper into the canyons, to a place known only to Tatsiai, a sacred valley with hot springs and healing stones. Along the way, he taught her how to follow animal tracks, how to feel the direction of wind, and how to move silently across the land. And she, in turn, began to understand the rhythm of this new life. Not one of fear or submission, but one of strength and peace. One night, as they sat beneath the stars again, Sarah took Tatsiai's hand. You saved me from death, she said. But more than that, you taught me how to live. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the firelight. And you reminded me what it means to trust. There, beneath the heavens, something unbreakable was forged. A bond not built by force or fear, but by fire and healing. They were no longer the widow and the warrior. They were something more, the return and the reckoning. Months had passed since Sarah had been abandoned to die. The desert had not only healed her wounds, but transformed her spirit. Once a widow with no purpose, she was now a woman of strength, wise in the ways of the land, resilient in heart, and deeply bound to the man who had saved her. Tatsiai was no longer just a rescuer. He was her partner, her protector, her home. But the past, like a shadow, never truly disappears. One morning, as Sarah was gathering wildflowers near a ravine, she noticed something strange. Boot prints. Fresh. Too large to be Tatsui's. Her heart clenched. She rushed back to the camp. Tatsui was already waiting, spear in hand. "They're close," he said, his voice calm but alert. "Who?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. "Settlers. I saw smoke in the east. They're camped not far from where I found you." Sarah's fists clenched. They came back. Tatsui watched her, sensing the storm inside her. "We can leave. Disappear again. The land is wide." But Sarah shook her head. "No, I won't run anymore. They left me to die. If they're here, they need to know I lived." Tatsui studied her for a long moment. "Then we go together." They moved silently, as one, following the trail until they reached a ridge overlooking a clearing. Below them, the same wagon group that had once cast Sarah out was setting up camp. The faces were familiar. Elias Green, the cold-hearted leader. Martha, the preacher's wife who had whispered poison into others' ears, and several others who had once eaten from the same fire as Sarah. Their group looked worn, even desperate. Horses thin, tents ragged. They had clearly been through hardship. And yet, their weapons were drawn, their eyes suspicious. Sarah stepped forward, revealing herself from behind a boulder. Tatsui stayed close behind. Gasps rose from the camp below. Elias stood, rifle in hand. "Is that Sarah?" someone whispered. She raised her voice. "You left me, alone, in the desert, to die." Elias narrowed his eyes. "We did what we had to do." "No," Sarah said coldly. "You did what was easy. You were afraid. You blamed me for misfortune you caused yourselves." Martha stepped forward. "We thought you were cursed. People were dying, and you." "I was grieving," Sarah shouted. "I lost my husband. I lost everything. And you turned on me like I was an animal." The settlers murmured among themselves, uneasy. Then Elias lifted his rifle. "You shouldn't have come back." In a flash, Tatsui appeared beside Sarah, his spear raised. "Lower your weapon," he said, his voice low and commanding. Elias hesitated, startled by the warrior's sudden presence. "She's with an Indian?" "Not just with him," Sarah said, stepping closer. "He saved me. He gave me shelter. He treated me with more kindness than any of you ever did." "You defend a savage over your own kind?" Elias growled. Sarah stared him down. "You are not my kind." Tension thickened in the air. Hands hovered near guns. Tatsui's stance grew sharper. Then, from the back of the camp, a younger man named Samuel stepped forward. He had always been one of the quieter settlers, but Sarah remembered him. He had once shared bread with her when the others shunned her. "This is wrong," Samuel said. "We left her, and she lived. That should mean something." "Don't be a fool," Elias snapped. "She's part of them now." Samuel looked at Sarah, then at Tatsui. "Maybe that's a good thing." Others began murmuring, uncertain. Martha looked away in shame. Elias snarled and raised his rifle again. But before he could fire, a warning cry rang through the air, Tatsui's battle call. In a heartbeat, he lunged forward and knocked the rifle from Elias' hands. The gun clattered to the dirt. Tatsui stood over him, spear tip at Elias' throat. "I will not kill you," he said, "but I will not let you harm her." Elias, trembling beneath the warrior's stare, didn't move. Sarah stepped beside them. "You don't get to decide my fate anymore. You had that chance, and you chose cowardice." She turned to the others. "I'm not coming back to your camp. I have a life now, a better one. But if any of you still carry decency in your hearts, walk away from this man's fear. Follow your own path." Slowly, settlers began to turn away. One by one, they dropped their weapons or nodded in quiet shame. Samuel looked at Sarah with a sad smile. "Thank you for surviving." Sarah gave him a nod. "For the first time, I truly lived." As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the tense clearing, Sarah and Tatsui turned and walked away, leaving the past behind them. They returned to their valley, where no hatred could touch them, where the fire was warm and the stars whispered stories of freedom, not bound by blood, not bound by tribe, but bound by choice and love.